in the morning of the Farhud, the 1st of June, the first day of Shavuot, our Muslim neighbor who was milkman with cows in a hut opposite our home. He said, Abu Ibrahim, where are you? Ibrahim, Abu Yaqub, where are you going? He said, I'm going to office. He said, no, don't go, stay home. There are massacre. They are massacring Jew in Baghdad. They have already knew, and it seems that rumors were spread that on the 1st of June of Shavuot there will be a massacre. And the next day told us that their neighbor, Muslim neighbor, they tried to rape the children, his daughters. The daughters were from 6 till 12. Yes, and then it is in old Baghdad they raped even children, only girls, and killed the pregnant women also. Afterwards, a few days afterwards, hundreds, if not thousands, of Jews came asking for help, money, clothes, everything. They said, please give us whatever you can. Even they took with them the sweepers. وقع من الظالم حتى المكنسية ماخذوها ويا من عنا. In this way, we were also, they told us about rape and murders and merciless attack of women and killing old men. And our parents were always keeping us away so that we don't hear these terrible stories of massacre and rape. The next day, when we want to buy bread and so on, a Muslim girl came and stood before the queue. So my brother and me told her, stay in the queue. He said, what? You Jews, after we have massacred you, we didn't break your head, and you dare to speak with us like this? We'll see what next Farhud we will do to you. So from then, there was no trust.
That was the last nail for the Jewish community to even think that their future is in Iraq, at that time.
The Nazis made a huge propaganda in Iraq and in all the Middle East, but in Iraq it was very, and they did attract a lot of people in the army, in government, and who were nationalists and who thought to get rid of Western influence and Western presence, that means British, the Nazis would be their allies in that. And we know that afterwards Hitler did say that he would liberate the Middle East of its Jews. He told that to the Mufti of Jerusalem, who was in Berlin at that time, Hussein. When I was in 41, there was Radio Berlin had an Arabic broadcast, and the man who did the broadcast was Iraqi, Yunus al-Bahri. We used to listen to Yunus al-Bahri, and he would King Abdullah, he would call him Hacham Abdullah, and he would insult Jews and so on. Anyway, so they were, they were Nazis.
And they were given order not to interfere. Cornwallis was ambassador, refused to allow the army, although they heard, and they heard the bullets and the shouting of the Jews, and they saw the crowds taking the loot the looted furnitures and so on. As they said, this is an internal affair. We shouldn't interfere. Although the Jews were in fact the the great helpers of the British and the most faithful to the British who managed and administered a new Iraq.
We have evidence from Freya Stark, the writer, who was in the embassy under diplomatic writ, and she later mentioned in two or three of her books the situation there, which was quite dramatic when the Farhud began. And we have stories from within the embassy about how reports were coming in of the terrible things that were happening. And she says that in the early moments of the Farhud, there were 4 attempts made by the curious thing, Oriental Secretary. There's an Oriental Secretary in the embassy. I think he tried 3 times and he wouldn't do a 4th approach to Cornwallis, asking Cornwallis to get the troops to intervene. But Cornwallis refused. So the troops were actually camped on the fringes of the city, about 8 kilometers, 5 miles outside Baghdad's center. Farhud itself, that was going on all around them, they could hear what was going on because they're right in the center of the city, on the river's edge.
It is very difficult to say how many people were killed because the numbers are certainly greater than the official figures published. The government didn't want to have a big outcry afterwards. So there were hundreds killed and maybe over 1,000 or 2,000 injured.
And it was in the embassy 2 days later that the famous Cornwallis held a dinner party for the generals and his officers who had been in the invasion squad, if you want to put it this way, who had been thwarted because they themselves, I have records of them saying how frustrated they were. They could hear the shooting, they wanted to go in, but they were being held back by Cornwallis. He invited these senior officers to dinner in the embassy, and there is this wonderful chapter where they're sitting at this rosewood table with crystal glasses and silver chandeliers and silverware, having a beautiful dinner in air-conditioned comfort because it was May, June, very, very hot already. It was an extremely hot spring that year. And they retired after dinner to have a game of bridge. And one of the officers has written that it was as casual as you like, that Cornwallis turned to his fellow players and said, "It's amazing, isn't it, how quiet it is? And just to think, only 2 days ago, 2,000 Jews were killed just down there." Very hard to say. We've seen figures ranging from, it wasn't 2,000, but it was higher than 400 and probably less than 900. Different estimates have come up at different times in history. No one can put a definitive figure on it, but it was huge.
Now people sometimes ask me, were there Jews in Iraq, in Baghdad? I said it was almost the third of the population of Baghdad was Jewish. It wasn't just a few hundred. And also, these Jews were there for 25 centuries. And they were there before anybody else. So they were not just immigrants coming from somewhere else. And when the Allied forces came to Baghdad, there were only 30 Jews, less than 30 Jews left in Iraq, in Baghdad, a country which had the oldest Jewish community anywhere, and which was a very big community. They were all gone.